is Cheryl Erickson, and I'm the Indigenous focused ECE instructor with Louis Riel Vocational College. Today in Developing ECE Curriculum, we're going to look at Chapter 11 and review the reflective process in planning curriculum for children. But before we get started, just a reminder to read Chapter 11, as this video isn't a replacement for your chapter readings. So when we look at programming and reflective practices, the topic of spirituality in children often comes up. And what I mean by spirituality is the process of finding meaning about the purpose and life. And so this process does require opportunities for the children to explore and experiment. It provides opportunities to connect with people, space, and other mediums as well. So spirituality is interwoven with our philosophies and again with our pedagogies, because our whole process when we think about program planning and what's involved in that process and what we want to see for outcomes with that process is really encouraging children to grow and develop. And so we want to ensure that we are maintaining that spirit within the children, that innocence, that curiosity, as they are moving through their daily environment within that childcare program. Their spirituality is going to come out in how they're exploring, how they're playing, how they're interacting with their friends. And so spirituality in a sense is just everything that they're going through in their day-to-day lives that brings new meanings and teaches them new things. So we want to ensure that we are providing a very rich curriculum to the children, that our program is offering lots of rich activities, and it's very positive, again, because that spirituality is something in children that we want to always maintain. So when we look at children and spiritual stages, in this slide of 11.1, we're going to look at infancy as well as toddlerhood and the types of things we see as far pardon me, as spirituality and behaviors. So for infancy, behavior is very much reflective and repetitive as well. Children in infancy tend to interact in their environment through different ways. They interact through touch, taste, and it's also expressed in that nurturing relationship as we meet their needs. And so infancy very much develops when infants have that positive interaction with their primary caregiver, and that creates those feelings of trust, love, those feelings of well-being. And so we want to really encourage that development of spirituality in young children as well, because that's going to set the tone for future development. We know that children that feel comfortable in an early learning environment, they feel safe and they feel supported and they have a really good relationship, will tend to explore the environment around them, and that exploration is where they're really learning and finding out new things, playing with new materials, developing friendships. So we really want to create that environment to set that tone. As children get a little bit older in the preschool years, so early childhood 2 to 6, children become much more mobile. They're moving around that environment. Their play and their behavior becomes a little bit more purposeful. Children learn to understand words. They learn language. They become more independent. That autonomy comes out. In this stage, it's really important for us to encourage children to use their imagination, things that we're doing in our day-to-day environment, our interactions, the conversations, the songs we're singing, the games we're playing, is really going to factor in on helping them maintain, again, that spirituality. And so it develops through those experiences, the storytelling, speaking about our feelings, our actions, events of the day, retelling those, recapping the events of the day, and really encouraging children to share their experiences with us. And encouraging them being positive as well, again, helps maintain that innocence and that spirituality that makes that really, we look at children when we develop our philosophies and we think about the goals and the values that we have for children, or that we feel about children. Really, that innocence and that spirituality is what defines what we want to do as ECEs, what we want to see come to light in our environment. So that essentially is almost our spirituality coming out in those activities as well. We want to see a lot of rich activities. We want to have a very open environment where children have a lot of different materials that they can manipulate, experiences, activities to participate in, a wonderful outdoor, indoor, play space for children to interact with and have fun, because we know that they're going to gain so much more information, as well as how they're going to develop is going to increase through those experiences. So we really want to offer a rich program. And again, that goes back to developmentally appropriate practices and what the curriculum framework is outlining for us as ECEs in our day-to-day program planning for the children. So we want to look at what our roles and responsibilities are as well as ECE professionals. And we do have a big responsibility to these young children in terms of what our program should entail, because we want children to develop to their best capabilities. We want to look at children as unique beings. So our program is going to cater not to all the children, but specifically individual needs as well. So our program should be one of discovery. We are facilitating a program with the help of all the parties, again, so the parents and the children. We want to make our program based on that emergent curriculum factor. So a lot of things that are going to come from the children. And how do we do that? How do we develop a program based on the children's needs? Again, that goes back to our day-to-day observations, anecdotal records, conversations with parents and with children and with our coworkers. That really helps us decide what it is that we're going to be implementing, what it is that we're going to be planning. And that's not just the activities that we may say, I'm going to sit down and do a specific activity with the children. It's actually how we're designing the environment as well. What types of materials and toys we're deciding to put out in our environment, because that does meet the needs of the children. We want to be respectful, model this respectful behavior in our interactions with the children. So that means getting down to their level and having conversations with them, showing that respect as well to the parents, because that's something that the children are going to see. And they're going to learn how to interact by seeing how caregivers and parents are behaving as well. So that really is a teachable moment for the children as well. We want to have a program that allows the children to express themselves within different mediums. So that could be art, it could be song, it could be dance, it could be movement. So we want to offer those interactions or those activities within our environment too. There has to be an environment that is also rich with responsibilities. So as far as what our roles are as a team of ECEs, as well as parents, what we want to see the children gaining within our environment too. There's responsibilities there to the environment as well. Simply cleaning up toys, putting things away, what their day-to-day involvement is within that program. And that program needs to be fun. So there has to be laughter and humor within that environment, because that's going to be really important, not only to the caregivers, but to the children. You want to have fun. You want to and make it in an enjoyable environment. We need to provide appropriate spaces, time for the children. So space meaning, what's our environment going to look like in terms of how we're setting the tone, how we're setting up our curriculum areas, what is going to be involved in those areas in terms of the numbers of children, the equipment, the toys, the furnishings. As well as looking at areas that offer quiet reflection for the children, because that's important too. Children can't function in an environment for up to 10 hours a day if it's constant noise. And so that's why our daily program allows for opportunities for the children to have a nap or rest, as well as opportunities for them to go into quiet play, like reading a story or doing a quiet art activity at the art table. So there has to be different levels of noise within the environment that's going to meet the needs of all children. And so by providing all this as our as ECEs, when we look at how we set the tone for our environment, we're looking at, again, how that meets the spirituality, again, of the children. We look at, I think, our own spirituality when we're setting the tone for that environment, in terms of even picking the colors and the lighting of your environment sets the tone of how it makes us feel. We want it to make the children feel good as well, and allow them to have a positive expression of their spirituality. We also want to really include that pedagogical documentation. And so when I talk about the pedagogy and how we as ECEs model that program teachings, the leadership, because we are leaders within that environment, we do set the tone for purposeful teaching for the children. So we want to make that learning visible for the children, for their families, for anybody that may be coming into the early learning environment, which sometimes is not only parents and children, but it's siblings, it's grandparents, and it's other professionals that are coming in to perhaps meet the needs of specialization type of inclusion program. So we really want to have a lot of information posted in our environment, from social stories to projects that we may be working on with the children, activities that the children are participating in. It could be their artwork. So we want to post those for everybody to see. And when we look at this, we also look at the learning through the lens of children. So we see the types of activities that we're providing for children. We see the outcomes, and that shows us what the children are learning and how they're benefiting from that program. So that's a really important part. Each center that you go to through your practicum experiences or centers that you may work at in the future should have some type of area within the center that you can post children's artwork or social stories, videos, show videos, some type of pedagogical type of documentation should be there for everybody to see. And that's really important for children to know that we do value their work as well. And again, that makes them feel good about themselves. It's also really good for parents to see what children are learning within that environment. Authentic assessment is really important too, because it shows that natural progression of learning. It really helps us to understand where children are developmentally and where we want to see them go. In the past, when we've explored the different types of theories and theorists of the early 1900s and sometimes earlier than that, they've made a lot of theories based on children and how children develop, but they weren't very authentic. They were preset types of situations where children were asked to complete different tasks. We know that that isn't really the way we can define how children learn. We want to see where they are progressing just by how they interact in their natural environment. So children, traditional assessments, going back to the early theorists, children were often asked a preset set of questions and then evaluated regarding their responses, and so we would learn where they were developmentally based on that. Now when we're doing authentic assessments, we will just observe them in their natural environment in a real life situation, just through their normal daily routines, and that's how we see where they are developmentally and how we can plan for future goals. As far as play situations, teachers determined experiences for children to play in. So they may have set up some type of experiment for children to maybe play in a dramatic play center and then evaluated it. Now we observe children in the dramatic play area, just their natural play unfolding, and make our observations based on that. So it's all based on child-centered learning. So we evaluate children really based on what we see them doing on a daily basis in those interactions. And that's really important because that tells us naturally how they're doing and where they are developmentally, opposed to setting them up in a situation that might not be comfortable for them. Naturally unfolding development gives us a better insight into where children are. So we want to design our program specifically for children and where they are developmentally. And so in early childhood, when we look closely, for example, at children who may be playing in the park outside, we would look at how mobile they are. We would watch them move around that environment. We would see them looking at plants, maybe dandelions, watching the birds, maybe looking at a tree, maybe looking at bark at a tree. So we could see that's a natural kind of unfolding of how they're developing, how they're moving through that environment, and what kinds of experiences they're participating in. They're looking at colors and shapes of objects, and you're having conversations with them. You're going to be asking them questions. You may ask them, they might ask about the life cycle of a worm or a butterfly that they might see on a tree. So these are really good ways to gauge how you might plan. If that's something a child is interested in, then again, as ECEs, we want to encourage that learning, and we're going to want to provide them with many different opportunities to learn about that. And it could be looking at bugs under a magnifying glass within the environment and talking about the colors and what do we see eyes on them, do they have legs, and learning about what that bug might eat. The habitat that it may live in. So there's a lot of dimensions to that learning for the children that we could teach. And it could be done in different mediums. You could do art activities based on collecting, say, the materials that maybe birds use to make a nest, and do something with those materials in the art area. Science, again, is maybe looking at these bugs or birds or something, pictures of birds or bugs under a magnifying glass. So you can bring the outdoor environment into the indoor environment, or or indoor into the outdoor, just to expand that knowledge and learning. So it doesn't have to end. It's something that is a cycle. It keeps going on and on. And within that process, you may expand into different types of things. You might go from worms to birds, because birds eat worms. So that's kind of the cycle of life. So I hope you understand that, how that planning can unfold, and how so many different things come out of that. You're also going to gauge those responses to what the children are showing interest in at that time, leading those investigations and giving them the opportunity. So for example, when I say they're looking at worms and they're holding a worm in their hand, by teaching them to investigate further, it's just by giving them ideas of, did you see what it looks like under a magnifying glass? Or what kinds of things or tools can we use to see the worm closer up? So it's sparking thought again in the children, and maybe from that thought, those conversations, you can provide them with the different materials to further explore things within the environment. So just in closing, as we look at program planning, again, it is a very cyclical type of process, and really you never know where it started, because it's ongoing throughout the time that children are within your care. Sometimes you start with a certain topic, and it moves into something different. Often through certain times of the year, you may revisit things that you've talked about in the past, and that's okay too. Talking about things that have happened in the past, or activities that have happened in the past, often does spark insight into new things as well. So it is like an ongoing process, and within every process you always learn something a little bit differently, or you think about things differently as well. Maybe it sparks a thought about something else, or you look at something in a new light. So it's always an ongoing process, and as long as the children are finding joy within that process, and it is purposeful, and there are good learning outcomes, that's fabulous. That's what we want to see in our early learning environment. So just as we end this, please do see your instructor if you have any questions regarding Chapter 11 and the reflection process, as well as just check in with your instructor if you have any, to ensure that you haven't missed any handouts or assignments pertaining to Chapter 11.